James gasped awake, his body lurching forward as the beeping of medical monitors filled the sterile hospital room. His throat was dry, his limbs weak. A nurse rushed in, eyes wide with relief. "Mr. Halpern, you're awake," she said, pressing a call button. "We thought we lost you. You've been in a coma for 3 months." James blinked. 3 months? His last memory was driving home in the rain, headlights flashing, the screech of tires, then nothing. His head throbbed as he tried to process it. Days passed, and James regained his strength, but something felt off. The shadows in his room stretched too long at night. A doctor asked him the same questions, word for word, in 2 different conversations. A man in a dark suit stood in the hallway outside his room, unmoving, watching. No one else seemed to notice him. Then came the dreams. Shadowy figures crept toward him in his sleep, whispering in a language he didn't understand. He woke up gasping, only to find his hospital room untouched, except for the faint smell of something burnt lingering in the air. One night, he saw it while awake. A tall, faceless figure stood over him as he lay in bed, its presence a void, darker than night itself. James felt paralyzed, his body refusing to move. It leaned forward, stopping just a few inches from James. Frozen with terror, he could smell a burning rot coming from the creature's mouth. James screamed. Darkness swallowed him. James gasped awake. The room was different, brighter, more real. His mother sobbed beside him, gripping his hand. "Oh my goodness, James," she whispered. "You're awake." Confusion fogged his mind. "What?" His voice cracked, dry and unused. "Where am I?" "You were in a coma," his father said, eyes red-rimmed. "A whole year. We thought we lost you." A year? Not 3 months? It had felt so real before, but that had been a dream, a nightmare. The weeks passed, and this time everything was right. No flickering shadows, no watching men, no whispers in the dark. His friends visited. The world outside his window moved naturally, and his body recovered. The first time waking had been a hallucination, a twisted dream while he lay in a coma. James was awake. He was sure of it. It was his last day in the hospital. As he packed his things, a soft voice murmured behind him. "You're still not awake." The lights blinked out. James spun, heart hammering. Once again, the shadow creature stood in front of him, unmoving, waiting. A sharp pain lanced through James's skull. Flashes of something else, beeping machines, muffled voices, the pressure of a breathing tube. His breath hitched. He wasn't awake. The nightmare started over. It began with a single bite. A patch of flesh torn from my forearm, chewed, swallowed. The pain was sharp, yes, but the flavor, oh, the flavor, richer than marrow, sweeter than any fruit. A warmth spread through me like the first sip of brandy on a frozen night. I licked my lips. I tasted divinity. At first, I thought it would stop there. A morbid curiosity indulged, a dark hunger sated. But the hunger did not wane. No, it deepened. The second bite was even better. The third, better still. A sliver from my thigh, a strip from my belly, always careful to not cut too much. I wrapped the wounds, cleaned them, tended them like a devoted butcher preserving his finest cuts. The body heals. The body is resilient. And when it heals, there is always more to take. My hands trembled when they brought the meat to my lips. But it was not fear. It was anticipation, reverence. The days stretched thin. my reflection shifting in the mirror, hollowed cheeks, sunken eyes, yet always starving. How could I starve when the flesh is endless? My fingers thinned, their purpose shifting. The hands exist to bring food to the mouth, so what need have I for them when the food is myself? The knife slipped beneath the knuckle, the pain distant, like a memory recalled but not felt. The flesh came away so neatly, and oh, how tender it was. I was becoming something pure, something perfect. I needed more, needed deeper cuts, needed marrow, needed sinew. The hunger consumed me. It whispered sweetly in the dead of night, told me of the feast yet to come. Then came the final bite, the last piece of me that could be swallowed, chewed, consumed. My body was gone, my fingers, my arms, my legs, all devoured. Yet I remain. I have no mouth, yet I starve. I have no hands, yet I reach. The hunger, it never ends. The rain had been relentless for hours, pounding against the roof in a relentless rhythm. The wind howled through the trees outside, and every so often the old house let out an aching groan, shifting under the weight of the storm. She sat comfortably in the armchair near the window, the glow of her phone's screen the only light in the dim room. This house had been their childhood home, and after their parents died in a car crash almost a year ago, she and her brother finally decided to sell it. She asked him to come down and help with the process, to sort through what was left and make the final decisions together. Her brother was on his way now, making the long drive through the storm to be with her. She spoke with him just an hour ago, but he was still at least 100 miles away. The house felt wrong tonight. It wasn't just the storm or the eerie quiet between the wind gusts. It was the woods across the street, the way they seemed darker than usual, shadows stretching unnaturally between the trees. She had the unsettling sense that something stood just beyond the tree line, watching. She realized the living room curtains were still open. Unable to shake the feeling of unseen eyes peering in from the stormy night, she decided to close them. A knock echoed through the house. She flinched, her breath catching in her throat. The front door. Someone was outside. Nerves slightly rattled, she grabbed her phone from the kitchen table. It had to be her brother, though he was still too far away, wasn't he? Maybe he made better time than expected, or maybe she had lost track of time, waiting, listening to the storm. Another knock, slower this time, more deliberate. She hesitated, then moved toward the door, her feet silent against the wooden floor. The storm distorted the glass of the peephole, raindrops streaking like tears across the lens. But through it, she could make out a figure, her brother. He stood on the porch, soaked from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, waiting. She hesitated for a moment, stepping back as if considering something. After a brief pause, she looked through the peephole again. Her brother was still there. He smiled for just a second before his face settled back into something neutral. His lips parted. "Let me in." The words were flat, empty. They carried no urgency, no warmth, just a quiet statement. She took a step back, confusion tightening in her chest. This didn't make sense. Slowly, she looked through the peephole again. He was still there. Just then, her phone buzzed in the palm of her hand, startling her. She looked down and saw her brother's name. Her stomach dropped as she shakily answered her phone. "Hello?" "Hey," her brother's voice came through, clear but distant, wrapped in the sounds of rain and tires on wet pavement. "You okay? You sound weird." Her gaze darted between her phone and the figure outside. A cold prickle ran down her spine. She swallowed hard, her eyes locked on the peephole. Outside, the thing cocked its head as if it had heard the voice on her phone. She started, but her voice failed her. The door handle turned. She sucked in a sharp breath and stumbled backward, the phone slipping from her grasp and clattering to the floor. Silence. She didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. Seconds stretched into eternity. The doorknob rattled once more, then stilled. A moment later, a floorboard creaked deeper in the house. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. She stood frozen, afraid to move, listening. A second later, the lights flickered back on. As if pulled by some terrible instinct, she turned. For the briefest moment, just long enough for her breath to hitch, she saw him. Then, darkness.